Okay, so we have our overarching mystery, new concepts, and a fresh villain all introduced, and the Lost Agent arc is barreling toward its first real physical confrontation. And it turns into a pretty surprising one. So let's talk about it. We last left Ichigo more determined than ever to regain his Soul Reaper abilities, ready to practice more with his Fullbring as he was shrunken down into a fish tank to train with Jackie. Jackie is one of the execution members we haven't seen much from yet, so I appreciated her being given some attention to help Ichigo train. She's pretty cool-headed and seems like a mature and sensible member of the group, especially when compared to Ruruka and Yukio and even at times their leader, but Ginjo is Ginjo and he's kind of a vibe. Anyway, the training itself was interesting enough. We got to see Jackie's Fullbring abilities, where the dirtier her boots become, the stronger she becomes. And that includes like mud, dirt, and even blood. So like, it's kind of a badass image to think of her getting more and more bloody during combat, only to get stronger and stronger the more she unleashes her, bloodletting. It's a really odd power, but it's a fun idea and definitely one I've never seen before, all centered around her boots. And she seems pretty tough. She's very strong. She's the right person to give Ichigo this kind of combat training. And she takes note that Ichigo seems to just try to adapt in the middle of combat without a real plan, which is fair. That's kind of what he's always done in the series. But it's especially risky now that he's fighting in his human body, where he's back to being real flesh and blood. It's not something that occurred to me, but it's true. Remember when Ichigo would have to either leave his body around or have Kon take control of it when he'd don his Soul Reaper robes? It's not something that was touched on much in recent arcs, and it was honestly easy for me to forget that he was in his astral body in recent fights with how long he was in his Soul Reaper form. And he was in it a lot, in both Soul Society and Hueco Mundo. That was kind of how we always saw him, to the point that I forgot that that wasn't his physical body, that was his Soul Reaper astral body. But this is his physical body, and it's less durable. But I loved that he kind of let her believe he was acting brashly when he really was formulating plans in the middle of fighting. It showed his intelligence, it showed how savvy he is in a fight, and it all comes down to his experience. This isn't his first fight. This isn't his first time facing someone that's stronger than him. And I loved that realization that he has way more experience in a fight than execution does. And it's true. Like he even says, he wasn't a Soul Reaper for all that long, but even in that short period, he gained so much experience and so much growth. Think about the people he fought. He fought Kenpachi, he fought Byakuya, he fought Aizen and Grimmjow, Ukiura, and he faced all these people and he had to try to adapt and learn and overcome, and he fought such incredible opponents, so of course he learned a lot from the actual fights themselves. There's no greater teacher than actual experience. And I love that this really focused on that, and focused on Ichigo's, pedigree. He's been through a lot. Yes, he's a novice to Fullbring abilities, but that doesn't mean he's a novice to fighting in general. Ichigo's Fullbring powers, though, go out of control, and him wanting to keep pushing anyway makes sense because it plays off of who he is as a person. He always goes above and beyond to try to push himself further to attain the power he needs. Now, more than ever, he wants to get stronger. He needs to succeed because of how powerless he has felt for over a year. In the past, Ichigo pushing himself has paid off, and often when he is able to achieve something great. So given that's been part of his experience, of course he'd try to apply that here, to just push through and figure it out in the moment. But I love how dangerous all of this feels, because we're in uncharted territory with a power we don't fully understand, that Ichigo doesn't fully understand, and Kubo does a great job of conveying just how unstable Ichigo's new power is. We also got Chad and Orihime discussing Tsukishima's abilities, something I did a lot of myself in my last video, where she tells Chad what happened and elaborates more about how she feels about it and what she experienced. And the more worrisome part to me is that Tsukishima says that he left a mark on her, so they no longer have to bother with her. So now that Orihime views him as a friend, maybe she always will, he permanently did something to her to view him that way. It's just very scary and concerning, and I'm worried. But after talking with Orihime, Chad tries to learn more about Tsukishima by asking Ginjo about his powers and telling him what Orihime shared. It makes sense, Ginjo knew Tsukishima, so of course you'd go to the source to try to find out more. more. And I'm not sure what to make of Ginjo's reaction to hearing about Orihime, because according to him, Tsukishima's sword doesn't have a special ability outside of like being able to cut through anything, which seems to not be the case unless he, you know, is literal, because Orihime asked the really creepy question last time, what did Tsukishima cut inside of her that didn't leave any physical damage but did something to her? So maybe cutting through anything could apply to that as well. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't fully understand what Tsukishima could do with that power, but I mean, it's kind of either he's lying about this for some reason, like maybe he doesn't want to freak Chad out too much, or he legitimately doesn't know and doesn't understand. Both are possible. Like Tsukishima might never have told Execution about his real powers, just like Aizen didn't tell Soul Society about what he could really do. So it wouldn't be the first time a character hides what their real power is. I'm not sure that Kubo would use that trick again to this extent, so I'm inclined to believe that Ginjo legitimately doesn't know about what Tsukishima's sword does, or at least the length of what that sword does. I am really glad though that he thought of what I did last video, which is check on Uryu and see if anything happened to his thoughts or his feelings toward his attacker. That's the key, because like I went into before, the difference in the attacks between Uryu and Orihime are real strange, so we need to address that. Let's go chat with Uryu and find out where he's at mentally. Though Ginjo suggesting it wasn't Tsukishima that attacked Orihime was an interesting idea, but one that we know is false. Like, we as the audience saw it happen, and that theory seems to get shot down real quick when Tsukishima out of nowhere suddenly asks him if he's sure about him not attacking her from outside the front door. He's just standing on the other side of the door going, "You sure about that?" Listen, I thought I sang Tsukishima's praises as much as I could last video, but then Kubo went and gave me more reason to praise him, because this whole sequence is incredible. Tsukishima deciding to go after Ichigo directly was great, and seemingly he only did it to get a reaction from his former comrades. He could have gone after Chad, but he's like, how funny would it be? How much would Ginjo be surprised if I just went straight for Ichigo? This decision and the way he followed through on it really made it clear that this isn't Aizen. It's such a different kind of tactic compared to all of the preparations and the planning that Aizen used to do. Tsukishima isn't sending scouts or attack parties. He's not making diversions elsewhere while he sits on a throne. He's not waiting for the perfect time that he planned for to launch an invasion. He's just going in. Aizen could be direct at times, sure, but I always got the impression that he never went into anything without already practically knowing the outcome, or at least having made contingencies. To me, Tsukishima didn't seem like he planned anything outside of, I'm gonna kick the door in, and then we'll just see what happens. Which is wild, and a completely different kind of enemy to be up against. I straight up gasped, guys, when Tsukishima cut through Execution's door while Ichigo was training. It was a little alarming, not to mention worrying that Ichigo is in such a vulnerable state as the big bad shows up. He's just stuck in a fish tank while the main antagonist walks in. But you gotta love how casual Tsukishima is about his entrance. First off, he was apparently standing outside the door listening to them talk about him, just waiting to literally cut in. And I adore how calm he is when he strolls into the lion's den, says hey to his old friends, ignores Ginjo, and then without any warning cuts the box that Jackie and Ichigo are in. Just an incredibly nerve-wracking sequence, but Tsukishima's nonchalant home invasion was so fun. This guy's not worried about his former teammates at all, like literally at all. Just pure goblin behavior to waltz in and be like, hey Giriko, hope you're no longer an alcoholic. Hey Yukio, read a book. This was fantastic. And it was terrifying when Tsukishima just like instantly attacks the fish tank. At first I'm like, oh god, I don't know what's gonna happen. If for all I know, the fish tank will explode and either it'll wipe out everything inside or Ichigo and Jackie are gonna pop out all morphed together. Like, I don't know. It could have been real bad. But thankfully, and Tsukishima knew this, destroying the container just releases everyone into the real world. But Ichigo did come out looking a little bit different. He's progressed even further with his full bring, and it's revealed that he is a clad type. Fullbring, which means he wears his power, and it kind of connects to how his clothes changed when he was a Soul Reaper during like his Bankai. I definitely noticed his different robes when he first got his Bankai, but never gave it too much thought, honestly. I just thought, oh, it's part of the transformation. The sword changes, his clothes change. But more than that, I love how it symbolically plays into Ichigo as a person and what he is at his core. He is the type of guy that wears his heart on his sleeve and puts it all out there. His desires and his hopes are plain as day, and he wears them proudly like armor, but also never hides who he is. It's right there for everyone to see. Like he realized in his previous training session, he's proud of his time as a Soul Reaper, and that pride is all over him in this form. I just love the design. The robes are made of like black fire, like Aku from Samurai Jack. The anime version has like these yellow highlights, which I also really liked. It made it really stand out even more from any previous Ichigo outfits. I like it a lot in a way that's like a possible step toward getting his Soul Reaper powers back, but not quite there yet, you know? Like thematically it feels like Ichigo's own soul and the soul of the badge desperately trying to bring back what he lost, to dream of wearing those robes again. It was really cool, but still feels unstable, you know? Like it's fragile, and it turns out it kind of is. The fight quickly gets out of hand and chaos ensues, and it goes outside thanks to Chad. As always, he's trying to protect Ichigo, and in typical Chad fashion, he starts smashing things and causing some real property damage. This whole visit from Tsukishima just is this incredible, chaotic brawl. From the surprise of it happening at all to how quickly it spiraled into a full-blown fight on the rooftops that starts drawing the attention of the public. This is the kind of thing I want to see happen now that this arc is centered in the living world. Human spectators, our fights spilling over into reality and into people's normal lives, and having to navigate that aspect of a shadow war. So much of Bleach has taken place either in other dimensions or in ways that human beings can't see, you know, or we replace a whole city and move it somewhere else while we fight in a city that looks like ours but isn't actually. You know what I mean? It's just, this is much more in the human world, and I love that. And there's such a graceful sense of danger about Tsukishima. He just carries himself with a lot of confidence and backs that up with how calm he is during the fights, no matter who he's facing. Seeing how this is our first confrontation with our new big bad, I enjoyed how he handled himself against Ichigo and later against Ginjo. You could feel that he always had the advantage, and he was never truly rattled or even on the back foot, and Ichigo's growth is impressive, and I love when he surprises his enemies. But his Fullbring has weaknesses because of how he still doesn't have complete control over it. In this case, it's like butter scraped over too much bread, where he starts to only be able to, he's not able to maintain it, the power that he's putting off, to the point where he's only able to protect certain parts of his body as it starts to fall apart. It makes sense though, he's still very new to having Fullbring abilities, so it would be pretty ridiculous if he unlocked this form and then whooped Tsukishima with ease. So I'm glad that's not even remotely what happened, but it's great to see how quickly he's growing and using Fullbring abilities, even surprising like Ginjo with how much he's progressing. Tsukishima does bring up the level of power that Ichigo used to have, and this made me ask myself some questions. How does Tsukishima know what powers Ichigo used to have? How long has he been watching him? In fact, how long have any of the Fullbringers been watching him? It seemed to be implied that they weren't really aware of Ichigo until Chad brought him up to them as an option to transfer their powers to, but Tsukishima wasn't part of execution at that time. So for him to know what level of power Ichigo used to have could mean he's been watching him for like when Ichigo still had Soul Reaper abilities. And even then, I doubt he would have been able to see his power in Soul Society or when he was in Wako Mundo, but hey, maybe he saw his fight with Aizen here in the real world. Yes, the city was replaced, but maybe he somehow avoided getting transported, or maybe he somehow was out of the city and was coming back into the city when it was happening. I don't know. Maybe he's from the Dr. Giraud school of surveillance, and he's got all these camera bugs everywhere watching the events of the series play out and just misses some of the important bits. I swear though, guys, if it's like Tsukishima's been watching Ichigo since the day he was born, or since he was in his mother's womb, I'm gonna laugh really hard. Okay, I loved that twist with Aizen. We can't have everyone having been watching Ichigo the whole time. We can't. I don't think we will, but we can't. In all seriousness. The implications of him knowing about Ichigo's Soul Reaper abilities are a bit creepy. It's a bit creepy. How does he know this? How long has he been watching? It was also great to see Ginjo fight a bit when he protects Ichigo and to see how he does against Tsukishima. I've only ever seen Ginjo really fight in like when he took on that Hollow and that filler episode, which doesn't really count. This was what it was really about. These are the two characters we've seen whose full brings are the most like Zanpakuto's, just two sword wielders engaging in a duel. But just from a visual standpoint, I like how their blades kind of reinforce my view of them. Ginjo is very direct, broad, and not very subtle, while Tsukishima's blade is more slender, smaller, less obvious. He doesn't stand out in the way that Ginjo does, and neither does his sword. You could feel the underlying tension between them based on how Ginjo's leadership came about. I'm really liking Ginjo as an ally too. He tried to even force Ichigo out of the fight to protect him, and while he said it was because he couldn't let Ichigo die, which is true for their transfer plan to work, I'd like to think that there's a real friendship starting to grow between them, and that was the real reason he was protecting Ichigo so much, even if he wouldn't admit that. But because of the nature of Tsukishima's power so far, like with the Orihime attack, there's kind of a built-in concern and threat where in the back of my mind, I was nervous that if he manages to cut or stab anyone, then maybe they're gonna suddenly think of him as a friend, just like what happened with Orihime. I think it's a very telling thing how Execution responds to their former leader. They don't all try to jump Tsukishima immediately when he first comes to the compound, despite having the numbers. They don't really try to engage him until Chad and then Ichigo do. And even then, most of Execution stays out of the fight, so it's obvious that they're maybe scared of him. Even when they have him surrounded after rescuing Ichigo, they don't finish him, they don't really make a move. Maybe they can't bring themselves to, or maybe they've already been affected by his full bring, so partially view him as a friend maybe. We don't know the extent of his abilities, but based on what happened to Orihime, it just takes one cut to change someone's view of him. That's a dangerous power to have in combat. The people fighting him have to make sure they aren't even nicked. The fight could end real quickly if you suddenly think your enemy is your friend. But yeah, it turns into a case of having to escape from Tsukishima, and Yukio helps protect Ichigo with his video game full-bring powers, literally saving him in both a real sense and a video game sense. That was clever and fun, and I knew his power would be connected to his PSP looking device somehow. Once they protect Ichigo, Execution convinces Tsukishima to leave, and he obliges, so it's clear he's very specifically after Ichigo and not after his old friends, because I got the impression that he probably could have beaten all of Execution if he wanted to. That's the vibe I got, that they're scared of him. This whole thing was just a great confrontation that gave us a gauge of how Ichigo could do against the new big bad and how much he still needs to grow. He's made some huge improvements and some great progression toward unlocking his full bring and possibly regaining his Soul Reaper powers, while we also continued to dive into the mystery of Tsukishima's abilities. But this was a close call, and hopefully the next fight will be just as exciting, but Ichigo will be able to stand up a bit better. But thank you, Kubo, for giving me such an unexpected clash to really amplify the intensity of the arc. We got some action, but that mystery is still hanging over everything, and I'm excited to get some answers. For now, Ichigo just needs to keep improving, and maybe it'll take being in a video game to help him level up. That's where we're going to stop here, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel a little bit more, please become a member. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'll see you all soon. I've got a ranking video coming up, a Q&A coming up, and of course, continuing into the series of Bleach. Take care. Bye.